I think actually the key point I want to make is in relation to Minister Ring. Unfortunately, he's just left, but I'm sure he'll be listening. No, just rural development is something we need to get right. My mother comes from a town you know well, and all points from there to Gougane and between is as important to us as anywhere in South Dublin. And I think rural development is key to what this government has to get right. And I'm concerned at the nature of the change in that regard. I very much welcome the arrival of Minister Murphy, it's a nice ring to it, into his position. But I would have thought that you have a key role in terms of rural development, because my understanding of where we were going with the National Planning Framework, the way it was devised by Minister Coveney, is that really it was a key moment to put the question back to rural Ireland and towns and cities across the country as to how are they going to develop as part of a new national plan. My understanding that was the key planning change we were going to do in the national from the original strategic plan. And what I'm concerned is, I'm not too sure how we're going to do that, where there are now several ministers, a Minister for Rural Development, a Minister of Agriculture, who's a role in that, a Minister for Arts and Culture, who I think also has a critical role, and I'm not too sure the splitting of those two ministries is the right thing. In fact, I think it is the wrong thing. I think it makes the Culture Ministry too small. I think you miss that cultural element in the whole rural development aspect. And I don't see it working. And given that this is the key, really only change from the previous Cabinet in the creation of new Minister for Planning, a new Minister for Rural Development, this is not an insignificant issue. And I'm just interested to see how that's going to work. But it has to work. And it has to connect to what we're going to do in the National Capital Plan Review and in the National Climate Dialogue. And I think it's the reason I say a Rural Green Alliance, because that's the nature of what's needed. Given what I was saying earlier about us making this leap, taking this whole climate change issue seriously, Minister Creed, farmers are the front line. I had a meeting with Teagasc last week, 250 of the top farmers. We absolutely saw eye to eye that they're the front line, key scientists. They have to be the people who are tackling climate change. So this is a rural development issue as much as anyone else's. And I just don't see in the Cabinet reconstruction how that's going to work. And maybe it will. I mean, listen, if I'm proved wrong and Minister Ring works with Minister Murphy and with yourself, Minister Creed, then I'll step back and say, fair play, you've done it. But I just have concerns. I'm not too sure what the strategic thinking is in those new ministries. I'm not too sure what the Culture Ministry is doing out on their own, and I'm not too sure what the Rural Development Ministry is doing, if it isn't doing Deputy Minister Murphy's job, which is this whole planning issue about how we develop, and particularly how we develop towns, because rural development is not just about the farming, it's about Boyle, County Roscommon, and Macroom, County Cork, and Charleville and every other town. No. It's the exact same in Leinster, but that's our problem. How do we revive our 19th century market towns as part of rural development? That's a planning issue. So how is Minister Ring going to manage that? It's okay, Westport's working because it's a tourist boom town, but there's not many Westports out there. So how do the towns which aren't Westports make it? And I would love to see that. How's that resolved between Minister Ring and Minister Murphy is one of the key questions I have. The last point I'd make, if I can, we have too many super junior ministers. I'm sorry, teams of 15 are for teams of 15 for a sense. There's something in the human condition that you work well when you're around a table in 15. Once you start to get to 20, which is what we're at now, you lose cohesion. I think it's almost akin to a UK cabinet. One of the problems with the UK is they create this monster cabinet, 25, 30 people, whatever in the room. It doesn't work as a team. You have too many super juniors. And I'm sorry, it must be a very difficult decision, hard call in terms of some people losing jobs and so on, but you have too many. There are too many people around the cabinet table. And I'd have to say, in terms of new politics, there are three things we have to do. Health, universal health system, climate, how we get that right, and also, thirdly, how we fund third-level education. I cannot understand how we have a Minister for Education which is not responsible for answering that key question in conjunction with the House. And it gives me a certain lack of confidence that we're going to be able to answer the question in the remaining time that we have. There are some of the concerns. I wish all the office holders well. I wish the government well. But we're going to be all over this rural development issue, Danny, because we work together on it, because there is common cause. And that... Well, no, that's what we need. And you're going to have to get Minister Ring to work with Minister Murphy in the same way to make it work. Thank you.
Deputy Healy.
Thank you.
No, please. The time is very limited. Deputy Healy, you have short of 3 minutes.
Yes, Ceann Comhairle, the cruel capitalist extremist policies of recent governments have devastated Irish society, have devastated low and middle income families, have created poverty for families and for children, and in fact have facilitated the evictions from family homes. And of course it has left our country with a chaotic health service and a housing and homeless crisis. And in the very short time available to me, I firstly want to address Minister Harris in relation to health matters. And I want to say to him that 9 months ago, he visited South Tipperary General Hospital in October of 2016. He described the conditions at the hospital, and I quote, as utterly unacceptable. And also, quoting, he said, "Solutions must be found." He went on to say that a decision would be made before the end of the year. Nothing has happened. The hospital is a progressive, forward-looking, efficient hospital. But unfortunately, despite the best efforts of staff, there is horrendous chaos at the hospital. The month of June, just the month that we have, there has been as many as 31 trolleys on the corridors of the hospital. What in God's name is it going to be like in the autumn and winter of the coming autumn and winter? Patients on trolleys have no dignity or privacy. They lack access to adequate bathrooms and washing facilities, and staff are run off their feet and are struggling to provide a safe service in a hugely pressurised atmosphere. South Tipperary General Hospital has been in crisis for in fact more than 5 years now. It has experienced savage budget cuts in that time in funding and staffing, and while all the time it has increased its activity, both at emergency department level, at outpatient level and inpatient levels. The hospital, Ceann Comhairle, is bursting at its seams. It is operating at 130% capacity. The medical department is operating at 150% capacity. Normal capacity or full occupancy is regarded as 85%. The hospital urgently needs additional inpatient beds, as promised by the Minister on his visit. And I want to now call on the Minister tonight to fulfil that promise and to make funds available immediately for 40 additional inpatient beds to address the chaos at the hospital which has been caused by the policies of this and previous governments.
Now the government have 10 minutes in their slot. Government. Taoiseach.
Thank you. I share my time with Minister Donoghue. Thank you very much. Ceann Comhairle, are you speaking? Chair, Minister Rosseswell.
So 3 of you, 3 minutes each, or 3.5.
Ceann Comhairle, it's a great privilege to have the opportunity once again to serve in government, a government of purpose that will work towards a prosperous nation for all and in every community. It has been an honour to serve as Minister in 2 departments. Throughout my time as Minister for Justice and Equality, there have been major changes in significant areas of public life, changes that I am very proud of and changes that I campaigned for my whole life. And I believe the Commission on the Future of Policing will represent a seminal moment when it comes to the future of An Garda Síochána. As the First Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, I had the privilege of introducing a number of groundbreaking reforms, including the comprehensive reform of the child protection and welfare system in Ireland. I am very proud of the successful children's referendum and, of course, the marriage equality referendum. And I am so honoured to continue in my role as Taoiseach. Life is a series of new challenges, and I am very pleased to accept this new portfolio, which at its core is about creating opportunity. Getting a job, being able to pursue a career and provide for yourself and your family is the best opportunity a person can get. It's the best way out of poverty. It is the best way of giving the kind of support that future generations need. Unemployment is falling. There are challenges on the horizon. I noticed, of course, that not one speaker so far from the opposition has commented on the fact that unemployment has reduced from 15.4% down to 6.2%. What a change. and what a change in the lives of so many of our citizens, and what so many of our citizens want to see. The task now, of course, is to create and innovate, to spread opportunity and enterprise far and wide, and as the Taoiseach said, to the four corners of this country and everywhere in between. We now have the green technology, we have the artificial intelligence, we have the economic foundations on which we can build the future of Irish industry on endeavour, creativity and investment. We are an island at the centre of our global world, and we will redouble our efforts to attract talent and investment. And I am greatly looking forward to playing a central role in this government, which will be totally guided by the absolute priority of providing equality of opportunity to each and every person in this republic. We have to banish the disadvantage and exclusion that still cripple too many lives. And until we do that, as I've often said, our democracy is unfinished. We have to use our economic growth to make sure that nobody is left out. We will ensure that we protect and use that growth to transform Ireland into a modern, progressive society. This will be a government of delivery that ensures that everyone can have their own opportunities for themselves and their families in the time ahead. The Taoiseach spoke so eloquently of a republic of opportunity. The task ahead must be to restore opportunity to those who have lost it and provide opportunity to those it has passed by.
If you so wish.
Oh, thank you. We believe that a state that stands for social justice and for equality of opportunity. We believe in turning our face towards the world, holding out our hand in welcome, remaining at the heart of Europe, as we've made clear again and again, and seeking to capture new hearts elsewhere. That is what we will be judged on, and this government is totally committed to that goal. To conclude, let me return to words I have used in the past. Democracy is not about entitlement, it is about contribution. Each and every one of us in this House has a contribution to make to the exciting future that can lie ahead for all of our citizens. Thank you.
Minister Ross, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Ceann-Comhairle. The Independent Alliance is delighted that the Taoiseach has decided that we should be kept in the same roles as we held before. And we do share his vision for equality of opportunity in Ireland. We're also delighted that we have the opportunity to reinforce the programme for government, which we agreed with Deputy Varadkar, as he was then, and the government of the day this time last year. And we were grateful, pleased, that we managed to agree that many of the things that we believed in have been accelerated in the programme as it's going to go forward in the future. That includes the UN Convention on Disabilities, that includes the judicial appointments, that includes also 2 bills introduced by Minister Boxer-Moran, and it includes a programme by John Halligan. All those are agreed to be accelerated. Will be accelerated, and they will be accompanied in many cases by more free votes, we are assured, in the future and in the coming years of this government. This is welcome. This is welcome. I would like to address one or two of the issues addressed by Fianna Fáil and indeed by Deputy Troy, with his interruptions, not with his contributions, because his interruptions are always far better than his contributions, because they're brief.
Deputy, Minister, all of your comments, and you're here a long time, should be addressed through the chair.
Trying to win the Heckler of the Year award.
Thank you. No bilaterals in this House.
And in particular, I'd like
to. For you, Deputy Troy, no bilaterals.
I'd like to address the issue which he's been interrupting on all evening, and that's the issue of step-aside Garda Station. Thank you for that, and thank you for the opening, Deputy Troy. Let me address that for you to satisfy you a little bit. Yes, Deputy Troy, you are right. I did campaign for the opening of step-aside Garda Station. You are right. It was part of my platform at the last election. You are right. I campaigned for it since I came into government. And let me say one thing. When I was negotiating on the programme for government on this particular issue, do you know who the biggest pushover was on the issue of step-aside Garda Station. Micheál Martin. I went to him first and I said, would you give us step-aside Garda Station? He said, no problem. It's over. It's yours. And today, he's coming back and he's saying that's a pork barrel deal. He was offering pork barrel politics by the bejesus at the time. And these guys, and you know what these guys over here said? They said no. They said we can't do it, we can't put it because we can't interfere with the workings of the gods. But your guys were fine. And indeed, Micheál Martin was the guy who went up to step aside during the last general election. That's right. And he said on television, it can be recorded, when he was asked, would you open step aside Garda Station? Definitely, he said. Yeah. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. And today, what's he saying? Oh my God, that's a pork barrel deal. We disapprove of that. Oh, yeah. Come on. Come on, Deputy Troy.
Then you have to give Peter Fall.
Come on, Deputy Troy. Yeah. So let me say this.
Minister Ross.
There's another opportunity.
Mr. Ross. I would just ask you, Deputy.
When I next,
Deputy Ross, I would suggest to you not to be inviting interruptions.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
No, he's not like.
When I next come to negotiate a programme for government, it'll be over there. I'll be looking for the pork barrel deals. I can assure you, because I can't get them out of these guys. All right, but you're a pushover, you guys. Now let me address something else. Let me address something else in silence, please. Now, let me address something else in silence. The issue was addressed again by Micheál Martin again this evening. He said that there was some trade-off, he said, between Maura Whelan's appointment, he said, and the step-aside Garda Station. Well, let me tell him something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
I have to ask you to refrain, please.
Without interruption.
We're all mature politicians and act as such, all sides.
Correct. Let me tell you something. I have to clarify this. It's important. It's important to clarify this. I learned, first of all, about Maura Whelan's proposed appointment yesterday morning. When I learnt about it, there was no conversation about step-aside Garda Station. There has been no link of any sort between the two. But let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. I'm not going to take any lectures from Fianna Fáil on political appointments, and particularly from Micheál Martin. And let me tell you why. Does he remember a woman by the name of Celia Larkin? Does he? Does he remember that she was appointed by him to the consumer agency?
You should refrain from mentioning names of those.
I won't mention her name. But do you remember this?
Giving you guidance, Deputy Minister. I don't think.
Do you remember this?
Sorry, Minister. Sorry. You may be Minister, but I'm in the chair. What I'm saying to you, I thought you wouldn't need that type of advice.
Okay, that's fine. I apologise, Karen Cullen. Just let me remind the opposition of this. The person in question, who I won't name, was appointed by Micheál Martin without interview, without conversation, but she did happen to be his boss's partner. Now that presumably gives him every right to criticise other people for appointments here. The appointments by Fianna Fáil to the judiciary, they stuffed them with their own people for years and years
on Deputy Michael McGrath.
I am going to introduce a judicial appointments bill, the new Minister for Justice, next week to sort out this problem once and for all. The old system is rotten and should not be tolerated.
Minister Ross, you can't extend the time. Now, the Fianna Fáil slot have 10 minutes, and I understand Deputy Michael McGrath, Deputy Kelleher and Deputy Thomas Byrne is sharing.
Thank you very much, Last Ciarán Comhairle, and I would like to congratulate Taoiseach Varadkar and all the members of government on their appointment this evening on what is a huge personal honour for each and every one of you, and I genuinely wish you well in your portfolios. Collectively, you all face enormous challenges, of that there is no doubt. Among the priorities have to be protecting Ireland against Brexit, managing the economy, fixing our health system and delivering houses for our people. And the forthcoming budget, Minister Donoghue, and I wish you well in your role, in 2018 will have to be built on those key priorities. Delivering homes for our people has to be a top priority. And I wish you well, Minister Coveney, in your new role, and I congratulate you. But we're now going to have the third Minister for Housing in less than 16 months to face up to what is the single biggest emergency that our people are facing. We're now going to have a 3-month review of a plan that is less than 11 months old in terms of rebuilding Ireland. And, I really have to question the level of priority that this government is giving to that issue. And Minister Ross, what I would say to you is, as the man who has been such a fearless opponent of cronyism, such a passionate advocate for judicial reform, that when it came to what you reassured the House is an absolute coincidence that the announcement of the reopening of Stepaside Station and indeed the appointment of Maura Whelan to the Court of Appeal, without the government even going through the process that you regarded as inadequate. The principled opposition to cronyism, the principled advocacy for judicial reform went up in air like a puff of smoke. As they'd say in Cork, you're a gas man indeed, Minister Ross. Taoiseach and ministers, among the priorities that you are going to have to face will be helping people in this country who are in dire straits, who cannot get home help, who cannot access home care packages, respite care for people with profound disabilities. There are young people in an absolute crisis who cannot get access to mental health services. I could give you a list of them. There are children in my constituency, and I'm sure all over the country, waiting 18 months and more, who have special needs, waiting for even an assessment of need, not to mention gaining access to any service whatsoever at the end of that. You're facing some very big questions as a government. I think the performance to date of this government has not been good enough. It has not been up to standard. Among the big questions you face are, what is the future of the universal social charge? The new Taoiseach says it's remaining. The programme for government says it's on the way out. Are we going to deal with the pensions crisis? Are we going to have auto-enrolment into pension schemes? Are we going to actually do anything about climate change, the greatest challenge of humankind? Are we going to even aim for balanced regional development across our country? Are we going to really tackle the issue of social inequality and child poverty? And are we going to prioritise the best long-term investment of all that we can make in our country, which is our education system? Those are the challenges. You haven't succeeded so far. You've one final opportunity. Thank you,
Billy Kelleher.
Just first and foremost, may I just say on a personal level, just to congratulate those that have been reappointed and those that have been elevated to the position of Cabinet, and in the Taoiseach's absence to congratulate him on the privileged position that he now holds. Of course, with that privilege comes huge responsibilities, and we do need to ensure that those responsibilities are discharged by all of you collectively to address some of the huge challenges that are being faced in this country. I just want to refer to the issue of health for a moment. Minister Harris is not here, but in his absence, I still want to raise the fact, Ministers, that we simply have a situation that can no longer be tolerated in our public health system. We now have children with scoliosis waiting 18 months for an MRI scan to diagnose the fact that they have scoliosis. We have children waiting 2 years for surgery to address life-limiting conditions, scoliosis. That's what's happening there, Minister, at this present time. I specifically refer to Minister O'Donoghue because you are the man now in charge of both the taxation side and the spending side. And we do need to address those huge deficiencies in health. Taoiseach Varadkar spoke today about an Ireland for all, that everybody should be given opportunity. But people with scoliosis face huge challenges, insurmountable challenges. And parents that I have met on a continual basis are to the pin of their collar and seeing the life leave their children slowly because of this condition. That's what's happening today as I stand here, Minister. So in the short contribution that I've made, I just ask that we make some progress towards addressing these issues. So when we hear the broad parameters of a government that is caring, that is a centrist government that's going to address the challenges, that's going to afford opportunity to everybody, just think for one moment of the challenges that are facing those children. So in the October budget, I would urge that at the very least you would address the most vulnerable in our society, and they are people primarily on our waiting lists in our hospitals across the country. 660,000 people today wait for an inpatient or an outpatient appointment. It simply, Minister, is not acceptable. And I think collectively we have a duty to address these huge challenges in health. I don't underestimate the challenges, but to date they have been very lacking in terms of real commitment to addressing it. Minister Varadkar at the time, now Taoiseach, said that he had unfinished business in health. It was the understatement of the century, because the fact of the matter is there was no business done in health for a long time under the last Fine Gael government and this Fine Gael government. We abandoned universal health insurance, the underpinning of what was going to fund our public health system, and we have simply stripped away the ability of our public health system to deliver services. So, Minister Donoghue, Taoiseach Varadkar, in your absence I congratulated you. I wish you well personally. You have huge opportunities and power in your hand to address the huge deficiencies that are placing enormous suffering on vulnerable people, primarily kids that are waiting for scoliosis operations.
Thomas Byrne. Gormagat last Ceann Comhairle bhá lumsa cógáirdas a chur don Taoiseach nua Leo Varadkar Marain leishin agus leis an bhirt tugta bhicrá tháinig go mar isteach sa dáil seo dem lína inniuh agus is onóir mór do Leo Varadkar agus dá chlán gur haach ina Taoiseach inniuh agus táid lán sása sin agus táid ag súil go mbuinigh tú go dhéanamh tú gach iireacht an tír seo chun cin agus má dhéanamh tú an iireacht sin baimid ag tuairtaíocht don iireacht sin fiú muna bhfuilmid ag tuairtaíocht a gach follasí atá á chur bhaim agat. Now, I want to say something about education. I was briefly heartened with the news that there was a super junior minister to be appointed for higher education. But little question, sorry, can I just, before I get on to this, I want to congratulate Minister Regina Doherty from my own constituency, which I meant to do, and I should have done before now, but congratulate her on her elevation. I think it is an honour for the constituency as well as for her and indeed for her family. Now, in relation to the appointment of Minister Mary Mitchell O'Connor, I was very happy because Fianna Fáil have very much pushed the issue of higher education. And I was saying, right, finally at last, Taoiseach Varadkar is getting to grips with this and realising this is an important issue. But I was somewhat confused, and there were question marks in my head when you read your speech, and Minister Bruton was mentioned as having responsibility for the Technological Universities Bill and for third-level funding. Now media reports are coming through that in fact what happened was that there was a row behind the scenes where Minister Mary Mitchell O'Connor was offered a justice and equality brief, refused it and was given higher education instead, and that disappoints me greatly. If that's the way higher education is being treated, this is what's being reported by the Irish Times this evening, if that is the way higher education is being treated by this government, then my hopes were completely unfounded, and all the fears that we have about Fine Gael and higher education are absolutely true, and all the fears that you find expressed throughout the university sector, throughout the higher education sector, are well founded. They worry about Fine Gael's commitment to higher education. They worried about the funding. Now simply that whole sector is just thrown as a bauble to keep someone who's getting a demotion happy. Higher education should be promoted, not demoted. This is an absolute scandal and an insult to something that can be one of the ways of rescuing us from Brexit. I think it's one of the first bad moves that Taoiseach Varadkar has made. I think he's going to have to answer for that. I think we have said to the government that the Technological Universities Bill can be brought forward and passed by the summer recess. We urge you to do that. We want you somehow finally to get the message. It doesn't look like you've got that message tonight, and Minister Bruton has a job ahead of him. I don't know who's responsible for it. No one knows who's responsible for it, but you have demoted not only Minister Mary Mitchell O'Connor, but you've demoted higher education in this country tonight. And can I say about the appointment of Maura Whelan as President of the Court of Appeal, I worry for this government that will carry with it the stain of original sin for the entire length of the rest of your term, for which I wonder will there be any redemption. I think this is going to hang over this government like a sword of Damocles, and it's going to damage this unless the questions that have been raised legitimately by my party leader today are answered fully. Thank
you, Las Ceann Comhairle. There's been a huge degree of excitement around the House today for those newly appointed ministers and super junior ministers and their families. Obviously a huge sense of achievement, and obviously for others a sense of disappointment. But for huge numbers of people beyond the gates of Leinster House, they will be deeply unmoved by what they have heard today. And of course I'm talking about the 7,680 homeless people, including 2,708 children who will tonight sleep in emergency accommodation. the 90,000 or more families languishing on local authority housing waiting lists, the thousands, if not tens of thousands, of struggling renters, and all of those first-time buyers locked out of the housing market. 6 years we've had of Fine Gael in government, and by any indicator, the housing crisis is worse today than when your party first took office. Simon Coveney, the outgoing Minister for Housing, took office 12 months ago, and genuinely, Simon, it gives me no pleasure to say this, but never has a minister with responsibility for housing promised so much and yet delivered so little. Your legacy is a 20% increase in adult and child homelessness in the state, increasing numbers at risk of homelessness, spiralling costs of rental and for purchase homes, and a snail's pace delivery of social housing. Your first big self-imposed test in the Housing Action Plan was to end the use of hotels for families and house those adults and children in permanent homes. And just weeks before this deadline is to pass, unfulfilled, you walk away. Just 12 months into a 6-year plan, you are, in my view, turning your back on the thousands of families who are looking to you and for whom you promised hope for the future. Now, while ultimately this was a decision of the new Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, I have no doubt that if you had really wanted to stay in housing, you could have done so. And in fact, this is the 6th minister with responsibility for housing in 5 years. It's any wonder that the crisis has yet to be resolved. And it sends out a very worrying signal, Taoiseach, that you neither understand nor you're serious about tackling the housing crisis. Your appointment of your close ally, Owen Murphy, to the Housing Ministry is a big surprise. Now, Owen, who I know over the last number of years, is very smart. And I have no doubt that you will work hard, as Minister Coveney did in your brief. But you have shown little interest in housing policy in your 6 years in the Dáil. 25 times in total you have raised the issue of housing on this floor. 5 times you've mentioned the issue of homelessness, 4 social housing, and just once the private rental sector. So, Minister Murphy, you have an awful lot of catching up to do. And on hearing that you were appointed minister, I formally wrote to you requesting a meeting at your earliest convenience to outline our ongoing and deep-rooted concerns with the failure of your government's housing policy. As I said to your predecessor when he took office, if and when you do the right thing, I will support it, and I will stand here and welcome initiatives that you take that relieve acute housing stress. But when you are making mistakes, in our view, we will do everything we can to hold you to account. And with interest, you've been asked to undertake a review of the government housing plan, and part of me would like to welcome this, in particular the promise of potentially increased social housing delivery and the possibility of a vacant home tax. But given the level of disappointment that many of us feel now, after 12 months of Minister Coveney's failure to tackle the housing crisis, I'm not going to hold my breath that much is going to change in 3 months' time. Sinn Féin will, of course, engage constructively in any review, and we will continue to offer what we believe are credible policy alternatives to tackle the housing and homeless crisis. And crucially, we will continue to argue that the over-reliance on the private sector to meet social and affordable housing need and the weak regulation of the private rental sector are central to the failures of not just this government but previous governments' policies. The housing crisis can be solved, but only if the right policies and, crucially, the right level of investment are put in place to ensure that secure and affordable housing is a right affordable to all and not just a few. Thank you, Last Corla.
And now the final contribution by Minister Paschal Donoghue, who has 5 minutes.
Thank you, Last Corla. Can I begin by recognising the contribution and the achievement of Minister Michael Noonan as a former Minister for Finance, and to say what an honour it is to follow in his footsteps in leading the Department of Finance, in addition to my current responsibilities as Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And in the budget that I had the honour of introducing into the House with Minister Noonan, I concluded my words with the statement, and it was the statement used by others in the same debate, that the centre must hold, that we must find a way of reassuring those who are looking for progress, who are looking for stability, that centrist normal politics is capable of delivering it to them. And that is why the election of Taoiseach Varadkar and a cabinet who are honoured to serve him is an important development that deserves the support of some in the House, and I hope the interest of those outside of the House. Because what the Taoiseach has recognised, and he recognised this in his contribution as a member of the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party, in his efforts to become leader of Fine Gael, is in the face of the vacuous negativity that we hear on a constant basis from Sinn Féin and other members of the far left, that it is not enough to hold the centre. What you must do is redefine the centre. What you must do is re-energise the centre. What you must do is renew the centre. And that is what this Taoiseach, this new Taoiseach, whose life story, whose achievements in political life reflect the kind of Ireland that all of us aspire to create. That is what his election is about here tonight. And I salute and I recognise members of this House that are willing to play their part, that are willing to make the hard choice and look to be constructive in electing a government and at least allowing it to serve before condemning it and criticising it as a failure, as others seek to do. Because what the Taoiseach has directed, and it's been my privilege to do so as Minister for Finance and Public Expenditure, is he has asked us to look at what more measures can be taken, what more steps can be taken to ensure that we have a republic of opportunity, to ensure that we have a society and not just an economy that's capable of delivering opportunity for all, regardless of where you come from, regardless of where you're born, regardless of what your age. That is the kind of Ireland that this government, consisting of Fine Gael, our colleagues in the Independent Alliance, other independent members, are committed to doing. And what we see again and again in some of the contributions we heard tonight, from Deputy McGrath, from Deputy Bruin, from the Social Democrats, that talk about the need for action and show no interest in coming in to government. What we have seen for them tonight is their desire to point out what is wrong. We know what is wrong. We know what needs to be changed. We know the opportunities that our country has to meet. We know the anguish that we must seek to quench. But when I hear members of this House stand up here tonight and talk about our national debt, can we not also hear them recognise the progress that has been made in reducing our deficit? Can we not hear them recognise the fact that as we move into next year, this government will ensure that our country does not need to borrow to fund the public services that we depend on? As they point to what we need to achieve in relation to child poverty, for example, could they not also recognise that in 2015, 13,000 children were lifted out of absolute poverty? And what is our commitment to do, and our desire and ambition to do, is to create a society in which more of those children are lifted out of that situation, in which more people, our elderly, our families and our citizens, have an Ireland that reflects their ambitions, their hope and their work. And that is what this administration, led by our Taoiseach, is determined to do. And then I heard so many members of the far left today stand up and describe this as a bubble. This is not a bubble. This is a parliamentary chamber in which the voices of the people of Ireland are represented and which, at its best, the voices are heard. And what this administration will do is hear those voices, hear their dreams, their concerns, their worries, look to build on what has been done, but look to achieve far more. And I had the privilege this morning, and I will conclude on this point, Last Cancora, of attending the reopening of the wings of the National Gallery of Ireland with our outgoing Taoiseach, and whose foundations we will all seek to build on. And to see that building, to see that place that is more than a place, it's a space in which people can come together to look at our art and to reflect on it, all of which was facilitated by the very changes in our economy that so many here tonight would said would never happen. So this is a Cabinet, this is a Taoiseach that will be working night and day, conscious of what needs to be done, conscious of what we need to achieve, but also conscious of the journey that our country has made.
Anish Taraman Keshakar, the one order in the Dala and you are saying cash now. Go empty and Dalian, Leshan Tisha, the Animnu, na Chakti, Hanan Kapu, Eganugtran, Markolti, then Realtas. Na Chakta ata Wabashan Abadish Ta, na Chakti ata Nagunya Abadish Neil, Shiram Golden Cash Richa, Votal. Members, the question is that Dáil Éireann approves the nominations by the Taoiseach for appointment by the President to be members of the Government, and on that question a division has been challenged. Deputies Deputies Joe McHugh and Tony McLaughlin Yale, Deputies Angus O'Snuddy and Denise Mitchell. And I would remind members this is a manual vote and those abstaining can be recorded at the clerk's desk. Sin tarú na tá céige seacht níl a hachtaí le hall. Tá céige seacht níl de trí agus stéan trotha cuaig agus de bhrí sin tan ceis rite. Agus inis, pursuant to the order of the House, tan dal athló go dtí 2:00 an luúin seo thugann an fiú lá de meitheamh. Jamáid, come leiscail. Just checking you, Minister Flanagan.